Hi, everybody. This is Ruta Lee, and you're listening to TV Confidential.
Ed Robertson welcoming you to the 700th edition of TV Confidential, a radio talk show about television that will welcome back Lawrence Luckinbill in our second hour. Lawrence Luckinbill, the actor known around the world as Hank in the original Boys in the Band, Glenn Garth Gregory in the Delphi Bureau, and Sybok in Star Trek V, The Final Frontier. Calendar year 2025 marks the 55th anniversary of the original film release of The Boys in the Band. Lawrence Luckinbill will join us in our second hour. We hope you'll stay tuned for that. Also coming up in our second hour, we will play part two of a conversation that began last week with Kathleen Bradley. Kathleen Bradley, the actress known around the world as Mrs. Parker in Friday, and the first African-American model to join ranks with Parker's Beauties on The Price is Right. Kathleen was very much aware of what it meant to be the first African-American Parker's Beauty during her 10 years on The Price is Right. We'll talk to her about that and more when we play part two of our conversation with Kathleen Bradley in our second hour. Coming up later on this hour, we will play part two of a conversation that began last week with Morgan White Jr. Morgan White Jr., the longtime late-night radio personality in Boston, who is also the undisputed king of improv trivia. A longtime fixture in Boston, Morgan was among those considered to play Hawk in the ABC series Spencer for Hire. Spencer for Hire, of course, was filmed partially on location in the city of Boston. Morgan White Jr. will tell us that story and more when he joins us later on in this hour. Full program as always, folks. We invite you to sit back and enjoy. In the meantime, you may not have seen the story, but Gary Smith passed away since our last program aired. Gary Smith, the Emmy Award-winning television producer who, along with his longtime production partner Dwight Hemian, not only redefined the meaning of the television special, but helped shape the genre of variety television as we know it today. Gary Smith passed away Saturday, July 19th at the age of 90. You might recall that our friend Steve Binder not only worked with Gary Smith and Dwight Hemian on Hullabaloo in the 1960s, he also co-wrote a book along with Mary Beth Liedman called Fade Up 26. Fade Up 26, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television. Fade Up 26 is an oral history of variety television as told by many of the men and women who worked in and developed the genre. One of the movers and shakers of variety television, whose name comes up repeatedly in Fade Up 26, is Dwight Hemian. With that in mind, we thought we'd bring an encore presentation of our conversation with Steve Binder about the genre of variety television as part of our program this week. I was very proud of the fact, at least on a personal note, Steve, I was very proud of the fact that I knew half the names from the cover without having to look up who they are. So that means whatever it means. But there are a couple of names that came up several times in conversation. I want to ask you specifically about that.
Sure. I might note one of the prerequisites when Mary Beth and myself decided to really do it, and that was started 5 years ago, we decided on a mandatory way to approach everybody. All of the people in the book are obviously social friends of mine and peers and people I've known over my entire career, but we didn't want to phone it in. No Skyping, no iPhones, no telephone calls. They had to physically be in person, sitting with Mary Beth. And Mary Beth's class at Indiana University of Pennsylvania actually put together the group 15 questions to ask all of us. And the interesting thing is when I read the 25 interviews that Mary Beth did, and it took over a year just to transcribe them of the small audio copies we made of each interview, it was fascinating because I didn't know anything about any of these people professionally other than they were very successful as producers and directors in variety, and we were all inventing our own careers, basically, and I never saw them direct actors. I never was on their stages when they were talking to their crews and listening to their headsets and so forth. So it was a totally enlightening experience for myself as a reader, as a layman, rather than as one of the quote-unquote experts in the book.
Well, I have found in talking to professionals such as yourself, Steve, that's not an uncommon experience because, as you just say, you're busy doing, the task at hand that is in your hands at the time, whether it's producing the Elvis special, whether it's getting the Petula Clark special off the ground and securing Harry Belafonte and running all the interference that you talk a little bit about in Fade Up 26. And plus, even when you're not busy working on your own shows, I've talked to a number of professionals who avoid watching television because that's work. So they cannot watch a television show the way, most people can watch a television show because they're always thinking, okay, if I were doing this, I might do it differently. So it's kind of cool to find out that the book was as enlightening and informative for you as it is for most readers. And I have found that when you learn something in doing a book, that comes across in your co-authorship.
Well, I appreciate that because when you think about the variety field in general, and I think Lorne Michaels, who's in the book as well, who's the executive producer and creator of Saturday Night Live, he said it's about time variety television got the recognition, and I'm happy to see this book come out because we've always been kind of a catch-all. One of the questions that I receive all the time is, can you define variety itself? And I say anything that you can't define, like drama or documentary or whatever, I guess would fall into a catch-all word of variety. So for me, it was always starting from scratch with a blank page, working on a project, and creating every single segment. I think we've gotten away from that with all these concert shows and basically amateur shows. I mean, we had The Voice, we had American Idol and so forth, but we've had they're a lot more sophisticated now. They're a lot more entertaining with all the lights and the sound and sets and what have you. But it all boils down to before television when they did Major Bowles' original amateur hour on radio, and people just get up one after another and show their talent by singing a song or juggling or what have you. But these kind of shows that we have done, and every single producer-director of the Academy Awards, the Emmys, the Grammys, the Tonys, American Music Award, they're all in it. And so they're all talking about their experiences, and I found it fascinating. Just the opposite of the person you talk to, I'm a sucker for a good story, so I can lose myself. I mean, when I go to the movies, if I don't walk out laughing or crying or doing something, I feel I wasted my money, but I can totally forget about the process, the editing, the painstaking multi-takes and so forth and so on. I just get into it, especially if I'm enjoying the experience.
We're talking to Steve Bender, Emmy Award-winning producer and director of such iconic variety specials as Lucy in London, The T.A.M.I. Show, and the 1968 Elvis Presley Comeback Special. Steve is also the co-author, along with Mary Beth Liedman, of Fade Up 26, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television, an oral history of variety television as told by 26 award-winning variety show producers and directors. Fade Up 26 is available now in hardcover through Kendall Hunt Publishing. Kendall Hunt Publishing. You can also find it at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold online. You have deep roots not only in television, you have deep roots in the record industry. Did one lead to the other?
Well, when I got into the business, period, when I went to college, I was in pre-med. I did not know what I wanted to be when I grew up. So it was really a case of having come from Hollywood and never even dreaming I was going to be able to get into the entertainment business. It was kind of a fluke beginning. And when I got in it, I never wanted to stereotype myself. I really wanted an eclectic career. So it was really a case that when I finally got into television as a producer, as a director, it was a case of where I loved entertainment. My favorite movies of all time have been musicals like Gene Kelly and American in Paris, and the great musicals and musical entertainers of the past in motion pictures when everybody crossed over into the beginning of television, and the record industry was booming in the 50s, 60s. It was crossing over from the traditional Sinatras and and Crosby's and Perry Como's into the beginning of the Chuck Berrys and Little Richards and the rock and roll world and Elvis Presley and so forth, I just felt it was a natural marriage between the two mediums. So I, early in my career, sought to partner myself with somebody that I really respected creatively in the music industry, and that's how the partnership between myself and Bones Howe came about. Bones had engineered for Lou Adler, who had produced the great Carole King album, Tapestry. I had met Lou early on in my career. I then met Bones Howe, and then Bones started producing records himself, and when we became partners, we were exclusively producing the Fifth Dimension and all their hits, the Association and all their hits. Bones even produced Laura Nyro, who I was very close to, and introduced David Geffen, the billionaire entrepreneur, when he was working as my agent at William Morris. And I introduced him to Laura, and he built his personal management career starting with Laura. But it was a case of where it was very comforting to know that engineers just didn't turn on and turn off microphones to pick up the sound, but I had an expert in the audio area where we could do these kind of major specials with music artists and have the total understanding of a professional who could work with a television engineer but really call the shots when it came to the balancing of the instruments and all the technical effects and so forth. And it's a tribute to Bones that a lot of my television specials, including the Elvis Presley comeback special, the Petula Clark, Harry Belafonte, all those early shows are now on DVD, and nobody is complaining that it was television soundtrack as opposed to a record, and which was very early on. I heard a lot of executives in my early days say to me, nobody cares about audio when they're watching television. It's a visual media. Well, I would really contradict that and say without a great soundtrack and without the sound, you wouldn't have any of the experiences watching just the video picture. And just try it sometime by turning your sound off when you watch a show and see the difference when all of a sudden the music comes in.
Well, it is the combination of the music with the picture you're mounting or painting or however you want to describe what you do when you're putting together, some of the shows that you've put together. It is the combination of all of those things that create the moment and that stir up, that evoke emotions that resonate with people, which is what keeps these shows not only what made them iconic and important at the time they originally aired, but why they're still relevant when we watch them 30, 40, 50 years later.
Absolutely. And also, the argument in the early days when television started, well, the speakers are so small in the television sets, or the people are listening, on inferior speaker equipment and so forth. And I was saying, hey, wait a minute. Radio and rock and roll and music in general is thriving with people listening in their automobiles on these little tiny speakers. So it's the mix. It's not the size of the speakers, so to speak. And now, of course, we've gotten light years ahead with all the technical advantages we have in digital sound and picture and so forth and so on. But I think the basics are there. I opened the Special Olympics in a national television special on ABC one year, and Prince opened the special, and he walked around the stadium, which we shot at the Metrodome, I think, which was a National Football League venue at the time. And he walked around the entire stadium and then came back and started tweaking the board and the sound system. And it sounded like when we actually did it, and I was in editing and playing it back, I said, hey, this could have been done in a professional recording studio. I mean, he was so brilliant in where to put the microphones, how to mix it, and EQ it, and so forth. And I found the exact same thing when I did the halftime with Diana Ross at the Super Bowl, where we had a helicopter fly her in and out in the middle of the live football game. And it was a case of where I hired my engineer who I'd worked with on a lot of television specials, especially with Diana, who had been Berry Gordy's right arm for years in terms of mixing tons of Motown records and so forth. And he did exactly the same thing. He made that stadium in Arizona sound like we were in a recording studio. And that was a time when everybody was lip-syncing because they didn't feel they could sing live in a huge stadium with the sound and the echoes and everything else. But it was proven wrong, and I insisted that the artists sing live to track. I did not want them, or live to a live orchestra. I did not want them lip-syncing. I used to jokingly say, if you want to lip-sync, then go do one of Dick Clark's shows. In fact, when Michael Jackson did one of our shows, and he'd always lip-synced on television, he was an expert at it. You'd never in a million years know that he wasn't singing live. And I said, Michael, on this show with Diana, you're going to sing live to track. And he did. I convinced him to do it and thanked me afterwards. And Diana thanked me after she did the Super Bowl, saying, I'm sure glad I didn't lip-sync. So it can be done. And the technical people are brilliant. I mean, if you don't know how to do something, I assure you can find somebody who does.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back. One more item. If you're starting a company, particularly one that is in an emerging market, you know that averting any sort of legal dispute is crucial to your business plan. Our friends at Tectonic Law offer an array of services that can help you avoid and preempt future litigation while also developing and protecting your intellectual property and intangible assets. Tectonic Law serves the needs of a host of emerging industries throughout California and beyond, including industrial designers, beverage makers, artists, farmers, retail stores, health practitioners, wellness experts, cosmetics manufacturers, nonprofit organizations, innovators in sustainable practices, and libraries. Go to tectoniclaw.com to learn more about how Tectonic Law can help your business thrive. tectoniclaw.com. Rock solid representation for groundbreaking industries.
This portion of TV Confidential is brought to us by our friends at Front Porch Realty, the community of realtors in the Northern Bay Area of California that is committed to finding the solution that is best for their clients. Whether you're a first-time home buyer or looking to sell or lease your property in Northern California, call Karen Strain at 415-886-7411 or visit frontporchrealtygroup.com for more information on how they can help you.
Hi, this is Julie Newmar, and you are listening to TV Confidential.
I want to dovetail to something you just mentioned in telling the anecdote of Prince and how he sort of helped, in his own way, help contribute to the sound of that particular special the two of you were working on. It kind of speaks to something that comes across several times in not only in the comments you gave in answer to the questions in Fade Up, Steve, but also in something you just mentioned at the beginning of our conversation when you're talking about your co-author Mary Beth Liedman. You have always had a team approach to whatever you do. I mean, there has to be one person at the top of any production, but with some people it's my way or the highway. You've never been that way. You've always believed in the collective approach.
Absolutely. I loved working with my crews, and I am what they made me. I mean, I learned everything from scratch. I mean, when I finally got into the entertainment business, I knew nobody. I had no relatives in the business. I started for a few weeks in the mailroom at a local television station in Los Angeles. By just the luck of God, about 6 weeks or 8 weeks later, I was a full director for a local television station and immediately moved to being a freelance director on the networks. But it was just always a team approach. I think I'm the pilot of the airplane, but I need a whole crew to really fly it, from the maintenance people down below to, the co-pilot and so forth. So not only of the producers and directors in this specialty field of variety specials and variety television in general, primetime, but it really is a case of, in working with these people, they are so knowledgeable, and they're the same people who started with me some 50 years ago.
Yeah.
All the camera crew, the audio people, and everything. It's been a real specialty, and we just lost, tragically, one of our original cameramen, Sam Drummy, and just seeing the accolades from all of his associates through the years and how everybody loved this guy and respected him technically and so forth. And one of the great tragedies in writing this book is that Marty Pacetta, who was a little bit ahead of me but a contemporary and part of the peer group in this field, Marty and I were good friends, and he did the Elvis Hawaii special, so I definitely wanted him to contribute. So there's stories about Hawaii and the comeback special in the book as well. But literally a few weeks after we interviewed Marty, he went back to his home in Palm Springs, California, and tragically, in a freak accident, was run over and killed by a neighbor of his when they went out to dinner. So the book is basically dedicated to Marty. We have his picture and a little dedication piece at the very front of the book. But, you know, life is day to day. You take it as you get it. And I always loved working in a think tank where instead of just saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, I'd walk into my meetings with my full crew if I could and say, okay, let's forget our titles, let's forget our salaries, we're a team. Let's just, you know, work on how can we make the best product possible. And in all these shows and all these specials, and especially for star specials, it was a case of the first ideas were basically just the foundation of the idea, and then we went from there to build the skyscraper and the penthouse. That was our goal. And it wasn't necessarily thinking what's going to please the executives, what's going to please even the public. It was a case of if we believed in any idea 100%, somehow we got to believe there are enough people out there who would believe in what we believed, and it would turn out great. And I've been very, very fortunate in my career to have had the opportunity. I started basically going to grammar school and getting a master's degree by directing Steve Allen for 2 years in his late night show for Westinghouse. That was 90 minutes a night with only 2 writers for the entire series, where today if somebody wins an Emmy for writing a late night show, which runs about 50 minutes in length, 30 people come out of the audience to get their Emmys and so forth. So the business has changed a lot, but with the internet, with all the opportunities now open, when I started, it was 3 major networks, a bunch of local stations and syndication, and that was it. So there weren't a lot of places to go find work. Today, if you want to produce or direct anything in variety or drama or anything, hey, you can go to a retail equipment store and get a camera that's perfectly acceptable to be broadcast. All you have to use is your imagination and have the passion to do what you believe in, and you have an opportunity to get into the business in a big way. I mean, Steven Spielberg just hired somebody because he got 3 million hits on the internet.
Yeah.
The opportunities are a lot more today than they ever were, you know, when I started.
That's right. You may be starting off with a limited audience, but if you give your best effort and do your homework and do your best to entertain, I mean, you never know. Eventually, you may find a Spielberg, or you'll find someone else who may take you to the next level. You know. My
feeling has always been, in order to be successful, and I've taught at University of Southern California for decades, and I've lectured and taught at other colleges and universities practically throughout the world over these years. But the one thing I feel, the formula for success, if anybody asks me, it's 1/3 talent, 1/3 timing, and 1/3 luck. Yep. And they're all equally important. And if you can't put all 3 together, you're going to struggle through your career. So you got to start out having the talent once you're given the opportunity, but that's only 1/3 of what it takes to really make it professionally, and so you do get recognized for your work.
We're talking to Steve Binder. Steve is the co-author, along with Mary Beth Liedman, of Fade Up 26, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television, an oral history of variety television as told by the voices of the men and women who were and are responsible for bringing those shows and bringing those stars into our homes for the past 65-plus years. Among the luminaries that Steve and Mary Beth interviewed for Fade Up 26 include Lorne Michaels, Marty Pacetta, George Schlatter, Nigel Lithgow, and Louis Horvitz. Fade Up 26, The Movers and Shakers of Variety Television, is available now at Amazon.com and wherever books are sold online. The name Dwight Hemian is a name that came up in a lot of the answers to the questions that you and Mary Beth posed in Fade Up 26. We'll continue our conversation with after this quick time out here on TV Confidential.
Now you can fly anywhere in the world and pay discount prices on your airline tickets. Book a flight today to London, Paris, Madrid, or anywhere else you want to go. And pay a lot less guaranteed. Call the International Travel Department right now at Low Cost Airlines.
800-222-0511. 800-222-0511. Again, that's 800-222-0511.